Go.
Okay, so yes, this is. I'm going to do some sort of remarks contextualising what I'm going to say, and then there's going to be a little bit of material or content, as it were, in there as well. But I suppose there's really a line between those two things that is a blurred line. I mean, I'm in the humanities, and so the context that we study in and live in are, as human beings, are a part of what I study in general and specifically in this module. So I want to start talking on the basis of there's been a recent initiative in the University of Reading we've been doing in our school, which is the School of Languages and Literatures. So it's modern languages and English literature, specifically trying to diversify the curriculum, right? So instead of just doing white, male, often dead authors, we would do authors from different backgrounds. So I guess you could think about that this way. So if that is your white, male author, you would then sort of move across to do a different author who might be a woman, or again, who might be from a different cultural background, ethnic background, and so on. We're always moving across horizontally in that way. And I've done bits of that in my teaching. In the first year, I introduced a woman philosopher called Sarah Kaufman. In the final year module, I'm doing a lot of weeks teaching around Edith Piaf. So, that's happening in my teaching. However, in the module in question here, it's called How to Think in French. I'm trying to do a few other things as well. One of those is to move a bit closer to philosophy rather than literature, which is kind of dominant in a lot of the modules that the students will be taking. And one advantage for this is that, one problem I have, shall we say, with literary study, which I also teach, I'm also, I write on and so on, I do my research on, but it does tend to be quite top-down. So if that's where the student is, everything's coming down from the author, down to where the student is, and you sort of passively receive the information. You study the novel, the writing, but we don't train you to write novels yourselves, and especially we don't train you to write novels in French. So we might study Balzac or Flaubert, but you're not writing novels in French in the style of Balzac or Flaubert. So it's an essentially one-way, downwards, top-down way of doing it. What I do want to do with philosophy, however, is that actually with philosophy you've got the right, as it were, to answer back. You get the right to argue with the person that you are studying, the philosophy you're studying. So actually, if the students here, it comes down in that you read the text, you study them, but you can also go back again. So there's a more of a dialogue, more of a process, an active process, if you like, between the student and the material that's being studied. The other thing I want to do with this module is, so say we've got the same model, you've got your individual author figure, whether it's a writer or a philosopher. Traditionally they tend to be studied singly, which is to say on their own. You do a whole term on Balzac, you do a couple of weeks on Flaubert. With philosophy, on the other hand, because of this similar dialogic process, we can actually explode that a little bit, and start doing philosophers together. So we might study, instead of one during a particular part of the module, we might study a couple of them together. And then you can start to analyse how they interact with each other, how their ideas bounce off one another. Why am I telling you all this? Well, because this is how this module is going to be structured, essentially. So in this early lecture, which is introducing the structure of this module, we're going to set out how these various processes of dialogue actually fit together. And who are the people that we're doing? Well, two of them are the most famous ones at the beginning of philosophy. Socrates and Plato. Here's a postcard which has famously been written about of the two of them, and the idea is that Socrates was the master who gave lessons and was a very authoritative figure, and Plato was the person who wrote everything down. And so we've got the dialogues today because the pupil, Plato, wrote them down. However, in this postcard, which you can buy in a Bodleian library in Oxford, they've got things the wrong way round. So you've got the person behind sort of telling or giving a lesson of philosophy, and you've got the person here writing it down, but actually it's Plato that's behind and Socrates that's writing it down. So it's quite a nice idea of, again, you get an exchange. You know, although it's meant to be one way round, in philosophy it can easily end up being the other way round. And that idea is what is going to be used to structure the module as we go through. So we're going to do 5 different blocks throughout this term where we study thinkers who've talked about similar ideas. I don't think I've really got time to tell you why each of, or the points on which they have differences and disagreements and agreements, but you can see them here anyway, so you get an idea. We're going to start with Jean-Paul Sartre and his existentialism phase, but also look at Simone de Beauvoir and how she takes that into feminist types of areas of thinking. Then we go back in time to Hegel and Marx, who studied Hegel, and they worked out very similar ideas together. Descartes and Pascal, again, had dialogues around the idea of God, but Descartes in terms of reason, Pascal much more in terms of tragedy and something lying outside of reason. Then we go back into the Greek era, so we get the Stoics. People say, well, you actually just have to put up with stuff, and so we'll have a philosophy of life which is based around putting up with the bad things that happen to us. On the other hand, in dialogue with them, you get the skeptics who say, no, you don't have to put up with it. You can ask questions, you can be critical. And then finally, we come to the guys we saw just now in the postcard, Plato and Socrates, these two figures who are constantly in dialogue. Is it better to teach charismatically and in person, like Socrates said, or is it better to write everything down and have a quite formalised way of studying, which is what Plato said. Okay, so you've got those two figures in dialogue way back at the beginning of what we call philosophy. Okay, I'm just finishing. The final remark I'd make about, in terms of introducing the structure, is that as we go through the term from top to bottom here, we're obviously going back in history. And that's not the usual way. The usual way is to start at some sort of beginning point, but that seems a little bit arbitrary to me. So how do we actually fix that Plato and Socrates are the beginning? You know, there are people before them that we can look at as the beginning. So it seems more, I don't know, more sensible to me to just start with where we are today. We start in the early 21st century, late 20th century, and then we go back, and progressively as we grow stronger in our learning of philosophy over the module, we will deal with stuff which is further and further away in history. So that's the reason for that type of structure there. Okay, there you go, that's it.